Good evening. Welcome to the Veterans Voice. This is Amanda Manier, your host. I am a veteran advocate and the managing attorney at the Veterans Law Group. And what we do is we spend our time helping to represent veterans before the VA. As I often say, my job, when people ask me as I'm traveling or working what I do for a living, I generally tell them that my job is to be quality control for the VA. Which usually gets a little bit of a question mark as far as, oh, you work for the VA. And I'm like, no, my job as a private attorney is to make sure that the VA does their job properly. So it is an honor to be able to work with veterans, not only inside our house. Most of our paralegals or all of our paralegals are either family members of veterans or veterans themselves. So it's really unique to be able to work with that caliber of people, as well as represent veterans directly before the VA. It's a great thing to be able to truly believe in every client that you're working their case on. We are live here this evening, every Tuesday here from 7 to 8 o'clock. Generally what we're doing is taking your questions live about your VA disability claims. I will always, even when I have a guest, which we do have this evening, be open to taking your calls about your VA claim. If it's something that you have a question about that we can be helpful, or I can be helpful to point you in the right direction, or just to give you some advice on how to navigate the process with the VA. We also often get calls in from family members and friends of veterans who are kind of watching them struggle through the process and see how they can help. That's how I got involved in doing this. I had a good friend who was struggling through the process, and I decided to use my advocacy skills as an attorney to help, and I kind of ended up running into this full time. So it's definitely a joy here. If you would like to join us live, our number here is 800-222-5222. It's 800-222-5222, and we will take your calls here live. Couple things I like to do at the beginning of the show is give a little bit of some news, some things that are being talked about, make sure you guys are all aware of them, that are specifically related to VA disability claims. So I'm going to touch on a few of those things before we bring our guest in. One of the big ones, things we've talked about quite a bit lately, is the PACT Act. The PACT Act that passed a number of months ago, that opened up claims for presumptives related to Agent Orange in Thailand and a few other countries, as well as the burn pits. That's what it's probably the most known for, is creating a list of injuries, a lot of cancers, a lot of respiratory things, that if you served in certain areas during certain times, that were in the Middle East area, and were exposed to burn pits, and you develop one of these conditions later in life, they will presume that it's related to the burn pit. So it's very similar to Agent Orange and how that's been treated. But the big question that's come up a lot in our office is, okay, they passed this law months ago. When are they going to actually start processing claims under the PACT Act? So there was a hearing that was held. There was some testimony up on the Hill. And what they indicated, there's a number of things going on. One is that they're needing to hire a bunch of people. So they're dealing with staffing issues, which, in fairness, the VA was already dealing with staffing issues. They have been on mandatory overtime for quite some time. But they're currently in the process of trying to hire people, but then they have to train them. So that's always going to be a little bit of a delay. Let's see, some of the news, they have hired approximately about 2,000 additional employees. They are expecting to start processing claims January 1st of 2023. Definitely don't indicate how quickly they're going to be processing those claims or what their capacity is to process them, but they certainly are trying to gear up. There was also some discussion about, with this mandatory overtime, they have indicated mandatory overtime for claims processors through the rest of the fiscal year, which should be through September of next year. But they're very aware that mandatory overtime is very costly, can lead to employee burnout. I can tell you from our end, experiencing decisions coming from mandatory overtime are often have some issues with them. So that's why they end up in our office. So if you fall within the PACT Act, you can certainly find more information out about our website, but I wanted to give a little bit of an update that they aren't currently processing claims at this time. there was an interesting discussion that went on about they're working with some outside contractors to somehow automate the process, but it's in a pilot phase. Again, my experience with anything that the VA tries to automate, where they want to try to make a computer put together a set of legal facts, some law, and put them together and come up with a decision, it can get a little skewy. So much more to, I guess, stay tuned. But if you fit within that, don't expect anything to start happening till they say start processing in January. So I wouldn't start seeing decisions for a couple months after that. So that's one of the things that's in the news right now. The other thing I will tell you is if you have turned on the TV at all in the last 6 months or so, especially the last 3 months, you have probably seen law firm advertisements for Marines who were stationed in Camp LeJeune. That was also part of the PACT Act. It opened up some doors there for people who were stationed at Camp LeJeune, family members who were stationed there, civilians who worked there and were exposed to toxins in the water. One of the interesting things that's going on congressionally is they're wanting to try to curb some of the attorney's fees. Generally in litigation, just as kind of the norm, is that if this is a litigation where they're going to sue the government, and generally attorneys maintain anywhere from 20% to 30, sometimes more than 30 of the award. So if the award at the end of the lawsuit is $1 million, then the attorney gets $300,000 of that if their cut is 30%. That's very standard, but they are trying to, they're talking about passing a law that's going to limit that down to possibly 10%, with fees like filing fees or copy fees or mail or that kind of thing being limited to 2%. It's currently being talked about. There's not a whole lot of movement on it right now other than just discussions, but if you fit within that, it's just kind of one of those things when laws get passed like this and there's an inundation of attorney commercials, you end up with a lot of attorneys that maybe have never even practiced in this area of law at all that are jumping in and trying to get involved. We personally are not handling cases like this at all because we don't do litigation. We do only VA disability compensation appeals. So we're working only within the VA agencies and then up through the appeals process there. This is a completely different thing. So, I got the news for you. Certainly not something that we are going to jump in. It's not something that we feel like any attorney should just jump into. They should be people who are very familiar with the process and experienced in that area. So that's a little bit of news going on. As I mentioned, we are live here this evening. If you'd like to give us a call and talk about your experience in working with the VA, or if you got a question about how to get your claim pushed through or advice, our number here is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. You can also find us on all the social media platforms. If you just search for Veterans Law, that is Veterans Law Group is the firm that I work for, and hosting this show tonight called The Veterans Voice. I am going, before I go to our guests, we have a guest coming up, Chris Livingston from the Contractors Growth Network. We're going to talk a little bit about his history and what he's currently doing post-military. But before I do that, I'm going to jump to call in James in LA. James, thank you for joining us.
Hi, ma'am. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure. What can I do for you?
Yeah, so I was calling because back in '08, I filed a claim for my knee and shoulder, and then I got a denial letter, but I don't think I ever continued with the what do you call it?
By filing an appeal or continuing the claim?
An appeal. Yeah, because I just figured, I send all the proof, the injuries on my in-service records, and I got a rejection, so I didn't appeal. And just recently, a couple months ago, I learned about the VA app on the phone. Mm-hmm. So I downloaded it, and I come to realize that they gave me a 10% non-service connected disability for my knee, and then a 0% disability for my shoulder. So I'm just kind of curious, what can I do with that? Like, can I still appeal that, or do I file a new claim for the injuries that I have?
If you would,
so I'm not sure.
Sure. It's actually pretty easy. If you want to reopen, it would be considered reopening the claim because you have to have filed an appeal within a year. So this one is, obviously past the year, so you would open it up. And what you would need to do is you would need to provide new evidence or evidence of an increase, meaning that the condition got worse since '08 when they first rated it. You would also need to address that non-service connection. So there's certain forms that you have to file. My recommendation, as always, if you ever listen to the show, is to not to do this alone. Get a representative. Doesn't mean you're not at the level that you need an attorney because you're not in the appeals process yet. You're actually reopening your claim. So my recommendation is go talk to a veteran service officer. There are veteran service officers that work at every county in the state of California. So you can look up the veteran service officer, county veteran service officers, and you should be able to find one that's local to you. Or VFW or DAV also will help you reopen that claim. Then they'll go ahead.
With reopening, do I have to file like an intent to file for that, or just reopen the case?
No, you would just reopen it. You're certainly, when it comes to intent to file, like the way that everything is working right now, we generally very rarely do intent to files. We just file a supplemental claim, say that your condition has gotten worse, or it's going to be on a 526 form is what it's called, saying that you're requesting an increase in those conditions. Since you're already service connected, they will actually send you for an examination, and then you'll get your decision based upon the new examination. So if you're willing to file an intent to file, you can just as easy file a 526, a new claim. You can do that online, or you can go to a veteran service officer and they can help you. But my recommendation is to go to a veteran service officer.
Okay, a veteran service officer, and then just let them know they can reopen the case.
Yep. Yeah, they'll have you sign a power of attorney that will allow them to look at your claims file and they'll look at your file on the VA system, and then they can see what needs to be done on it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Sure, James. Thanks so much for calling in. Feel free to give us a call back if you got any more issues. You are listening to The Veteran's Voice. This is Amanda Manier here on 790 KABC. We are chatting this evening, as with every evening, Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock, about VA disability benefits and things that are kind of affecting veterans in the news. Periodically, we do have a guest that joins us to talk a little bit about their military history and what they're currently doing with their life now. So I would like to welcome to the show Chris Livingston. Chris is with the Contractor Growth Network. I understand that you work in sales, and I'd love to just bring you on board and talk a little bit about what you're doing in your background. Welcome, Chris.
How you doing, Amanda? Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's a little late for you. I hear you're on the East Coast.
Well, actually, I'm doing some work right now, actually in Monterey County, California. So I think we're on the same coast right now. So I'm sharing that the same time with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that, because when I saw that we were taking your call live here this evening, I was like, oh, you're a late nighter. But thank you so much for joining us, making the time to join us. I love to tell stories, veteran stories here on the show when we have the time, and to kind of step away from some of the frustration of dealing with the VA, although we might get into that. But I would love to just start a little bit, lay a foundation, talk to me a little bit about what branch you served in, when you served, and what kind of deployments that you had.
Well, thanks so much. Well, I'll go ahead and start. I was in the Army. So I served from 2013 until 2020. So I was an Army Ranger, 2nd Ranger Battalion, and out of Fort Lewis, Washington. And I deployed 5 times, most of the time to Afghanistan, but a couple of times to just in Syria and Iraq as well.
I figured those were going to be definitely under your deployments. So we were talking, I don't know if you heard how long you were on hold with us, but I was talking a little bit about the PACT Act, probably something that you're somewhat familiar with, serving in those areas during that time.
Yeah, so I'm definitely probably all 5 of those deployments had burn pit registries, like after after the deployment, you sign up for those things. One of those, it may turn out to be something one day, but we just all kind of guided to do that, while we're in. So yeah, I definitely participated in my burn pit or two.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear it. Tell me a little bit about why you joined the Army. What were you interested in pursuing? What kind of motivated you to do that?
Well, I would say the biggest factor that drove me to join the military in general was, my dad was in the military, my brother was in the military, both of them were Marines. My grandfather was also in the Army. He served in the Korean War. So I think just being surrounded by that military experience, it was just one of those things where I definitely grew a big sense of just this idea that service was my payback to the life that I was able to have in this country. And so I felt like that was something that I needed to do. So service is something that I've been, kind of been ingrained in me for a very early age, and I still practice still to today. So that was definitely my biggest motivation.
That's awesome. Definitely hear a lot about that, especially working around here, of families that were all involved in the military. I've got some of that as well. My uncle served in Vietnam, and who recently passed, actually. And then my brother is one that he had gone into the U.S. Air Force, into boot camp, and had a bunch of medical issues, and so never really made it through. And that kind of gives me a perspective, because we do have claims that come to us that are veterans who were injured during boot camp or during their initial training. And, there's obviously the question of, are they still service connectable based upon, they didn't actually get out of boot camp? And the answer to that is most of the time, yes. It just depends upon what the injury was itself. So tell me a little bit about I don't know if you want to get into it. I'm certainly not going to push you anything, but have you had experiences working with the VA on disability benefits at this time?
So this has been one of my things. I definitely, so jumping out of airplanes, being part of burn pits, having, I even had a heat casualty while I was in the military, different things, going through Ranger School, all the different woes of that. There's so many things that I feel like, it was not as commonplace as I feel like it should have been to get everything documented. I think there was always a mad dash when you're getting out of the military to do everything you can to kind of document the things that actually happen while you're in. So I've been one of those people that have many friends who encouraged me, people saying, hey, you should do this and you should do that. Now as I get older, I feel like, okay, gosh, I'm having this nagging injury that's been prolonged for over time. And I just have been I procrastinated for so long on this. And to be very transparent, I have a couple, Ranger group chats, and kind of hearing about the burn pit piece has kind of always been like, this is just maybe my prompt that I need to go back and actually do it. I know that before we got out, I think there was something we had to do in order to at least be eligible to be able to claim it sometime. So I think I did that, but actually going forward with the claim, I have not. And I think it's mostly out of ignorance and maybe a little bit of procrastination and laziness as well.
Well, if you will bear with me, I'm going to get on a little bit of a soapbox, not only speaking to you, but to everybody else who's listening right here.
Go for it.
It's one of those things that you are certainly not obligated to file a disability claim with the VA. The VA is not going to ever presume that you want to. There are many veterans out there that are just not interested in it at all. And some of the misconceptions that I hear all the time are, well, somebody else deserves it more than me, or somebody else needs it more than me. Maybe it's not even a deserve, it needs it more than me. And the response to that is, you getting VA disability benefits is not taking away from anybody else. It's part of the contract that we signed as a country with you when you gave your service, you gave your life to us for a period of time, where I'm sure you understand the concept of, you were owned by the military 24/7, 7 days a week, didn't matter what it was. So part of the contract, while we pay you like crap while you're serving, is should you incur any sort of injuries while you're in the service, we will make sure that you are financially compensated for that for the rest of your life, or for as long as the injury exists. Now, separate from that, the other thing is, the longer that you go after your service, the harder it is to get things service connected. So one of the things that you mentioned, let me give an example of that first, and then I'll go back to what you mentioned, is if you're dealing with some sort of back injury, and these are the cases that end up in our office where the veteran is having to pay an attorney to get their claims through is it might be 10 years after your service. And typically back and orthopedic things do not get better. They tend to get worse over time. And so while it may not be that bad of a situation now, it's something that just kind of aches and bothers you. As you get older, it can become a problem that may affect your ability to work, all of that kind of thing. So the longer you go, the harder it is. So even if now it's a minor issue and you get it service connected as 0% or 10%, you've already jumped over the biggest hurdle, which is getting service connection. Then later on, you can always file a claim for increase like we were talking with James before the break. So those are a couple of things. And then as far as getting out, I hear that a lot, that it's kind of a mad dash to get out. And you're just wanting to go through and check the boxes to get out. And so there seems to be kind of a lack of education. You know, you have to go to a certain class, but it's a box that you have to check in order to get out. So it maybe doesn't always soak in. And so there are some things that sometimes people don't know, like the burn pits, that kind of thing. So I'm happy to hear that you guys are kind of sharing information. And I will step off my soapbox and let you respond to that.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, you know, this is definitely probably something just in my head, or maybe, you know, head trash or things like that too. But I think even the idea of calling it disability, I think sometimes words me against the, you know, of the div as well. So, you know, that's neither here or there. And I definitely hear what you're saying and recognize that, like you said, things generally don't get better, especially without any type of active, you know, work to make them better. And so, and recognizing also that things take a lot harder to actually claim, you know, the longer you go. So I definitely appreciate you sharing all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to emphasize that I have heard that many, many times, that assigning the word disability to it is a hurdle just internally. And so I always try to just reframe that. It's an injury. It's an injury that occurred in service, and you have that, or an injury now. And so that could be, you know, a sprained knee, a sprained ankle. It doesn't have to be that like stamped disabled veteran. Although, you know, that can get you some things as well if you carry that badge of being a disabled veteran as well. We only got about 1 minute to go, and then when we come back, I definitely want to dive into what you're currently doing. But one thing I loved about the questions that was sent over by your team was, how has your military life educated you and influenced you in your life? Like, what would you say, kind of coming at the other end, was a big thing that you learned from the military that's helping you as a civilian?
That's a great question. I think that one of the biggest things is probably boils down to resilience. And then additionally, just having the ability to be adaptable. You know, for me in my civilian life, I just realized that, you know, nothing is life or death. And that's not a great way to say it. You know, there are many things that are not life or death. You know, I'm not a surgeon. I'm not doing things where people's lives are on the line. So when I'm helping out people with their businesses, it may feel like life or death oftentimes because, you know, they've joined this entrepreneurial world and they've wanted to do everything they can, and they have to make sure they're taking care of their family, and they feel like everything lies on their shoulders, and I definitely get that.
You are listening to the Veterans Voice here on 790 KABC. My name is Amanda Manier. I am your host this evening. I'm a veteran advocate and attorney at the Veterans Law Group, and we get to help veterans with their VA disability claims in the appeals process. So if you are a veteran out there who is interested in getting some help with a VA disability claim, we work only in appeals. So that means you have to have received a decision from the VA and are looking to appeal it. That decision could be an underrating, or meaning you may be rated at a 10% and are looking at possibly getting an increase in that, or if you were denied service connection for any of your conditions. During the week, you can always find us at veteranslaw.com. The best way to find us is to go there and then click on the button that says See If We Can Help. It's going to ask you a series of questions and send you to our team here internally, who will reach out to you and see if it's something that we might be able to help you with. Again, the website is veteranslaw.com. Generally on Tuesday nights here, if we are live, which we are this evening, we are taking your calls. 800-222-5222 is the number to call during the live show here. If you'd like to chat a little bit about your VA disability claim, or if you're a family member who is interested in reaching out and seeing how you can help somebody, a family member or a friend in your life who is kind of struggling to navigate the VA system as well. Again, 800-222-5222. We are going to continue our conversation with Chris Livingston, who is from the Contractor Growth Network. He is a U.S. Army veteran. We were chatting a little bit about his story in the last segment. And so, Chris, I would love to jump in and talk to you a little bit what you're doing now in the civilian world about Contractor Growth Network, how you got involved, and what you guys are doing. So I'm going to give you the floor for a couple minutes.
Oh, well, great. Well, so the company is called Contractor Growth Network, and I am currently the director of sales there. So what we do is we help residential contractors really tell their stories, appear better online, and really save time with homeowners. Can you kind of run me through the questions one more time, please?
Sure. How'd you get involved with working with this area of coming out of the military? How'd you get involved in working in this industry?
Great question. So after the military, I traveled a little bit, and I had a couple other jobs before this, but actually a friend of mine from college actually started the company. And just through conversations back and forth, a little frustration I was having in my current job, and he said, hey, well, you have all these good ideas, man, and I'm looking to actually grow my team over here. Is something you'd be interested in joining. So just to kind of see the impact that they were making was definitely a big pull for me, and that kind of allowed me to jump on board.
Absolutely. So you're working in director of sales, and again, I just want to understand that the people who are your target market are contractors, correct?
That's correct. So if you think remodelers, home builders, people who do outdoor living spaces, and additionally painters, that's kind of really our bread and butter.
Okay, a lot of veterans working in the construction industry, so I'm sure that you being a veteran can help with that as well, being able to understand that. Are you guys working on a national basis? So if somebody's listening to this call, obviously we're over here in LA, but this show does get podcasted and broadcast out to all the podcast platforms. So if somebody's listening, do you work on a national basis or in certain local areas?
That's a great question, and we are national, yes. So we have people all throughout the United States, several clients actually in the LA area. Additionally, we have a couple clients in Canada as well. And so we are serving people all throughout the country.
Okay. And what is it that somebody's trying to accomplish when they hire your firm?
Great question as well. So generally what's happening is they are already doing a great job taking care of customers, providing an awesome quality product. But the issue they now deal with is maybe they're charging a certain price, and they're getting beat up on the price because people can't tell from online how they differentiate themselves between other people as well. Their value that they actually provide to people is not actually being shown online. So they're not being found online. They don't look high-end online. And maybe also they're getting work, but only through word-of-mouth referrals. But they never actually reverse-engineered why people are actually referring them out. And we're doing all those great things they're actually doing there to actually be online as well. So really is a digital marketing, agency that really takes care of contractors who are probably already being the part, but allows them to kind of look the part as well.
Yeah, I would imagine that, I can just speak for me being an attorney, that attorneys are not known to being great business people and building their professional business. They're good at the substantive legal stuff. I happen to be super interested in entrepreneurship and business, and so I've studied a lot of it over the years. But I would imagine it's the same with the contractors. They're good at their craft. They're just not great with the marketing, the advertising, the sales, all of that kind of thing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and another aspect of it as well is, like you said, people may be really good at the fulfillment aspect of it, but knowing the business part of it is also a struggle, kind of knowing that you have to be able to market and sell their product as well. A lot of our contractors are, the pain they were dealing with before working with us is maybe dealing with what we call tire kickers or people who are just looking for their actual services. Now, I hate that terminology, tire kickers, because I think that what it does is it puts the onus or the burden on the actual homeowner to know what the contractor's prices are or to know what their process is. But really, I believe that it's the responsibility of the contractor. If you're dealing with a lot of people out there who you're talking to have no idea what the stuff costs or have no idea what it's like working with you, understand it's actually your responsibility to put your pricing out there for people to see in a transparent way, and additionally with the process as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm the idea of this day and age having to have such a presence on the internet, even for people who work in just a local community as a contractor. Or, there's all kinds of things. Everybody now goes to the internet to find out, either to locate somebody like a contractor or even to check reputation of the contractor. And it sounds to me a little bit like you're helping them kind of develop their reputation online and visibility online.
Yes. Can I ask you a quick question, Amanda?
Sure.
So imagine you want to get your kitchen remodeled, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that just ballpark figure price, what do you think it's going to cost for you to remodel your kitchen?
Have no idea.
I know, and the thing is, that's the average homeowner. They have no idea, and that's normal. If you ask me right now how much it costs for a Toyota Tacoma, I have no idea what it costs because I've never done actually any research on it. But the thing is, right now I can go online and get a general idea what a Toyota Tacoma would actually cost.
Right.
I can go online right now and look up reviews of different parts about a Toyota Tacoma, like why I should get one, who would be a good fit for one, who would not be a good fit for one. I can go online to actually see the real value that a Toyota Tacoma could actually provide to me and my family. So think about it from a contractor's perspective. If you understand that your homeowners don't know this information, but you don't put out a ballpark figure price, you don't put out your process, you're not able to actually articulate your true value. If you're getting a kitchen done, it's not because, the real value providing a kitchen, it's not simply just the backsplash or the sink or the floors. The real value is opening up a space for you to enjoy time with your friends and family.
Absolutely. So you've definitely got the marketing side down, where you're showing what is it that the client, what is it that person is ultimately trying to get to. We work with that same thing in industry. I just went to an entire marketing thing that's changing a lot of the languaging that we're working in our marketing. To really, like you just described, in a way that person who is the homeowner is going to feel seen and understood. So with you being able to do that, we're trying to be able to do that in a better way, always improving, of being able to make sure that the veteran understands that we feel their pain, we feel their frustration. We understand that the biggest thing that you want to do with a VA disability claim is get it off of your back and not have to deal with the VA, not have to deal with the 30 pages every time something comes from the VA in the mail, And so I look at our job as, let us walk alongside us, let us come alongside you and lead in that and be the director of what your case is, and we'll let you know what we need from you. And so it sounds to me like you're kind of training and teaching contractors how to do that. And then it looks like you were actually I'm looking at your website right now, you're helping them actually implement that. So helping them with messaging and marketing messaging, and then also helping them implement an online presence for that language or for that message.
Of course, and that's correct. And so what we really do is we have an overall goal, and we'll make sure you have a marketing game plan. We don't want you just to be marketing for no reason, for marketing's sake. Make sure you actually have a game plan, so you have a roadmap together. Additionally, we take care of websites for our contractors. We take care of video marketing. We also do SEO, kind of blog services as well. And you talked about the idea that you actually went to a seminar recently for marketing. And can I share something with you that I would
Sure.
give to anybody in really in any industry, but especially the contracting and also the attorney space?
Absolutely.
What I would say is this. If you think about it, if I go to most attorneys' websites, if I go to most contractors' websites, sadly, all I see is this. I will see, here at X, Y, and Z law firm, we do this. We provide this.
Yep.
We've been in business this long.
We.
Our team does
Yes.
this for you. Exactly. It's me. But if
Uh-huh.
I ask the average contractor, if I ask the average attorney, and I say, is your website supposed to be for you or supposed to be for your end user, they always reply, it's supposed to be for your end user. And they are 100% correct on that. And so what I will say is, you have to realize that whole me mentality, the hero of the story of your website, of your presence online, is directed in the wrong way. It's not the hero of your story is not the end user, it's yourself on your actual website. And that is off.
You're speaking Don Miller language to me now. You're listening to The Veteran's Voice. This is Amanda Manier, your host. We are chatting this evening with Chris Livingston with the Contractor Growth Network. He is a U.S. Army veteran and is currently working as a sales director with the Contractors Growth Network. We're talking a little bit about what he does and what that means. Welcome back, Chris.
How are you doing?
Good. And real quickly, before I forget, because I'm terrible about this, let us know where people, if anybody who's listening who's interested in reaching out to you guys, where can we find you?
So you can find us at contractorgrowthnetwork.com. I think we're probably most found on our YouTube channel. It's simply the same name, Contractor Growth Network. And we also have a podcast called The Growth Network, and it is Contractor Growth Network's podcast. And I think that you would definitely love it. Our goal is to educate the industry and give as much away as we can to make better people as well.
Wonderful. Well, you sound like you're very passionate about what you do and have a lot of energy. And I was mentioning as we were running into the break that a lot of the languaging, I'm very familiar with Donald Miller Story Brand. It sounds like a lot of your marketing perspective comes from there, which I absolutely love. One of the things I wanted to get to before this last segment always goes really fast, and, is what advice would you give to veterans who are listening out there who are getting out of the military and looking to find something that they love to do and are passionate about?
What I would say is leverage your network, and just understand that it may not feel like you have a grand network, but even starting off in a small capacity will be very, very beneficial for you. As people go into the job force now and even become entrepreneurs themselves, what I'm finding is more and more people are, taking jobs and starting careers that have a certain bit of familiarity to them, and or they have people who are able to guide them in getting into that space. I'm working right now as a director of sales. Previous to this, I didn't really have much of a sales experience, but I did have a drive. I did have the ability to lead people beforehand. I did have the understanding of general understanding of business and how to run organization. And so that was valuable information that the military, helped foster as well. But I didn't know how it was going to translate. So you don't necessarily have to have all the answers right now. I don't think that when you turn 45, 65, you'll have all the answers. But I think that it's important for you just to leverage networks that you do have, because it's going to allow for you to find your next step.
Absolutely. I love that. I had written down when you were talking before about what you learned from the military of resilience and adaptability. And I think that is a great message that you just said of, understand that you learn a certain skill set. It may not necessarily mean that you're going to come out, if you did certain things in the military, some things don't translate to the civilian world, but character does, and, qualities, that kind of thing. I always say when I hire here, most of the people who have come to work for me, and when I first came into this law firm, we were 3 people, and we're at 15 now, growing like crazy. And it's one of those things that I love to hire veterans because I understand the work ethic, and they're going to have generally a heart for what they do. So I will hire somebody based upon those things, way over any experience in how to process VA claims and do VA benefits. And it sounds to me like you kind of ended up in that same way, where college friend who knew you and hired you, and then you let you utilize your skills to really develop into the role that you're in.
100%. And it's always, and it's just so cool to me to think about how much we're able to obtain if we just kind of like have some guidance and going to where we want to go. So it's something that I definitely would recommend to anybody, just leveraging what's around you and not being shy to do that.
Absolutely. Definitely giving it a shot. You're certainly not shy if you're spending 5 tours overseas as a U.S. 100%. Army veteran. That's certainly not shy. Okay, and then the last 2 questions I have, and we'll see if we get to any more, was what's the most important thing that you want to know, want people to know who are listening, who maybe are not veterans or not familiar with veterans? What's the most important thing you would want them to know? The amount of, I think maybe just understanding the dynamic, that I know of. Being in the military is the only job that I know of that you have an obligation to serve in, or there's a military, there's a jail penalty beyond if you just if you want to leave or kind of go AWOL, right? You kind of work. You did give yourself in a very unique way to your country, and so there is a willingness to follow a plan. There's a willingness to do the best things for yourself. But you've had to sacrifice quite a bit. So I think that dynamic is not necessarily fully understood by many people because, right now I really do pride the ability to be able to say, hey, work right now, you got to come second.
I got to take care of my family, right? But nothing is more important than your service when you're in the military. Sadly, your family is not, because if your son is having a soccer game or your son is having a baseball game, if the military is telling you to go somewhere, that's where you go. You know, there's nothing more important than your service when you're actually in the military at that time, and you try your best to navigate all the other responsibilities you have in your life, but you gave in a very unique way, and I think that sometimes that's hard for you to understand.
I love that you brought that up, and that's why I get into where I was saying earlier of like, you signed a contract with us as America that you were going to basically give your life for a period of time 100% to the U.S. Army. And, you know, there's one of the conversations that comes up a lot is if you have an injury that incurred, then you were not on duty. So, you know, I got a friend of mine who got in a fight in a bar and he broke his foot. So should that be service connected? Well, he was still owned by the military at that time, and had the military called him in at that moment that he broke his foot, he would have to show up and be there. There really is no such thing as being off work. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say you know, it's the idea that, you know, because, you know, things that you could do in your own room, the privacy of your own home, you know, as you said, out at a bar, at a restaurant, those things are definitely going to translate into, you know, what's going to happen to you at work, and not in the same way that it would be if you were having another job.
Yeah, definitely. And you've always got somebody who, you know, can tell you essentially what to do, and you have to follow orders. And I love that you brought up it's the only job that you sign up for that if you decide to quit, you could end up in jail. Like any other contract, even if you're under a contract, you're probably not going to end up in jail in any other type of job. Yeah,
you know, like you said, breach of contract, or may have a non-compete in some ways, but at the same time, it's not the same penalty.
Yeah, definitely. So here's another question I like to ask people, is as a military veteran, it's always a conversation that comes up is, how do you feel about when people tell you thank you for your service? Is it a positive thing, or you hate it?
No, I don't think about it. I just say thank you for your support and keep moving. Okay. I think that, you know, it's like they're doing their part by saying thank you, and, you know, I feel like I guess I appreciate it in that moment. I just say I appreciate your support, but, you know, I don't have to get pats on the backs or attaboys to know, to feel good about the service that I did. I think that I would still probably be in, or still be searching for something that is not actually attainable if I needed that. So I don't have like a negative connotation to it either. I think that people are doing, you know, what I feel like it's the right thing to do, by saying, you know, thank you for your service. It feels good probably in their end as well, and I feel very, very okay with just saying thank you for your support and moving on to the next, you know, part of our conversation.
I definitely love that perspective, and I appreciate you sharing that. I've seen both ends of it where people are, you know, grateful to hear that. We still work with quite a few Vietnam veterans who are dealing with Agent Orange or PTSD that wasn't addressed way back then, wasn't talked about way back then. And I find that they tend to have a different perspective on that. Different in the sense that they, when they came home, they were not given a hero's welcome. A lot of them were told to keep their mouth shut, don't tell people you were in Vietnam, because it was so controversial. And so it's different now that you're able to see, you know, be able to thank them because they didn't get the thank you early on. So that's just something to think about as far as people out there. But I do love your perspective on that it's giving that person the ability to say thank you without being offended, and then just kind of like moving on with it as well. Well, we only have a little less than a minute here, so I want to just real quickly, anybody who's listening, we're talking with Chris Livingston from the Contractor Growth Network, and if you are a contractor out there on a nationwide basis, if you're listening and would like some help with marketing, with getting a web presence, reach out to them. Again, contractorgrowthnetwork.com. And I love, Chris, that you also mentioned your YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris. Thank you for telling your story and for giving us a little perspective on what you're currently doing in the civilian life, and we definitely appreciate it.
No problem. Go Army, beat Navy.
Absolutely. Have a good evening. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice. We'll see you guys next week.